Okay, this subscriber asks, can you do a tip on how color temperature moves across left to right as well as from top to bottom of a flowering tree that is partly in light and partly in shadow? She says, I'm confused. Well, I think we need to clear up that confusion. Okay, the question that she's asking is based on our observation that as things move from light into shadow, the temperature of the color will become cooler. And that just makes sense because as it moves into shadow, it's no longer receiving the light that gives it its warmth. But where she's really getting confused, I think, is this directional thing. Now, the light is the movement of color temperature from warm to cool, light into shadow, is not always top to bottom or side to side. That movement is going to depend upon the location of the sun. So if in this case, now I found many flowering trees, but I was having trouble finding a flowering tree that was not that was aligned in a way I could explain this. So keep in mind, this is one flowering tree. This is one situation. So it's the principle you want to observe. So if your trees are already flowering, or if this is another time of year when you see this, when you have flowering trees, observe this principle for yourself. Here we see more light seems to be moving in this direction right here. Now we see, it seems that the brighter light is falling here, here, and here. And that tells us then that the sun, most likely the sun is somewhere right up here. Now, usually we can, if we're just looking at a photograph, we can tell where the location of the sun is by cast shadows. We don't have enough cast shadows. We do have some cast shadows here. We're not quite sure where they're coming from, so we can't really gauge that. So in this case, we can gauge it as to where we perceive the sun to be. So since we have, seems that we have the stronger light here, we have these shadows here, so that would tell us wherever the sun is, it's in a location so that these areas right here are causing this to go into shadow. Now, here's the way that works when you're trying to locate the direction in which a temperature moves in a flowering tree or anything. Wherever the sun is, at whatever angle the sun is located. So if the sun is located at this angle, and I need to do it like this so that you can see what I'm talking about. If the sun is located at this angle, the movement of light, the movement of temperature will be moving within the angle of the sun. When it falls into shadow, that movement will be moving more perpendicular. So rather than the movement of temperature being top to bottom or side to side, it is in alignment with the sun. So that we got that straight to begin with. I'm going to do just I've got the computer here first of all before I do what I'm going to do. I got the computer to do an analysis for you here so that you can see. Now you can see that these colors are cooler. These are the shadow colors. I had the computer to read the three degrees of value in these shadow colors. And you can see these colors are cooler than these colors. Now here I had the computer to read the hue within the light area, and it did not read this, but I want to explain that. So within the light area, you see the temperature where the lightest light, sun is hitting the strongest. You can see how the temperature then kind of moves more towards that middle value, and then it will hit this shadow area right here. And when it hits that shadow area, this is when it begins to get cooler. Now we know that in order to get a shadow cooler, or to mix for a shadow, we mix a little bit of complement. And usually the little bit of complement is also going to cool it, because every complement of every warm color is actually a cooler color. So that's enough to do right now. All right, on my palette here, I have You can ignore some and not, but I just did the full range of value here of the hue that we see in here. Whereas, but in the actual painting, we wouldn't use all this. I just have that there in case I wanted to do a painting of this flowering tree, and I would need that. So what we have here is the full saturation of hue that we'd see as the sun is hitting these bunches of flowers here on the tree. As it falls into shadow, it begins to turn this color right here. And that's what you see right here. These colors are these colors and these values of these colors. And that was because the actual hue I'm using here is a red leaning a little bit more towards violet, and the actual tube color was quinacridone rose for this particular subject. Our red leaning towards violet requires more of a yellow-green, or a green leaning towards yellow, in order to give it its temperature, and give it that feeling of shadow, which is what this is right here. All right, so how do we gradually move that? Well, first of all, we determine the direction of the sun. We determine the pattern. All right, here's the pattern right here. So if I were doing the preliminary for that, I'm not going to do the whole painting. I'm just going to show you the principle here. Here's the pattern, the sun moving in this direction. So if I were doing the preliminary drawing, I would indicate those bunches of trees, let's see, just sort of like this, kind of in that angle, the angle that I see the sun, right in there. And that then would indicate that shadow area. So I might then indicate the shadow area. So this would be one movement that's moving in the direction of the sun. Then we would indicate the shadow area, you see, is more perpendicular to that. So the movement is going to be moving in this direction. Now let's see how that works. Where the light is hitting that particular color, the strongest, you can see right in here, where the light is hitting it, this is still receiving light right in here. All right, so let's begin. We'll begin with that darker version of light. This is what I would call the low light area. If we were beginning right there in that low light area, then we begin like this in that low light area. Just sort of, I'm just going to sort of give you just a little bit of a cartoon. Well, not really cartoon, more illustration. I'm not really doing a painting here. I'm just more or less illustrating a principle to you. So each of those clusters is going to have its own directional movement. So this will be moving in this direction, but the light will move towards the sun. The low light will move to the middle light, to the higher lights or lighter lights. We're going to move closer to the sun. I'll show you how that works. So they'll go uphill, go up value. We go up the value area there, and begin to kind of throw that in, and it's not a direct movement. They move in and out with each other, so you observe that stuff. I'm just giving you a principle. Your observation is going to be your key there. All right. So then, as it gets closer to being in a direct alignment with the sun, it's going to get lighter. Now, I hope that illustrates that. Now, this begins to move out of the light and into shadow. And as it moves out of light into shadow, we have it right here on the palette. We would just mix those two areas. That's transition. Just mix those two areas. Mix just a little bit of the middle value of the low light with more or less the transition value of the shadow. You see that right in here, and that's going to move in this direction. All right, so get a little bit of that, and you can almost see how that feels as if it's beginning to move towards shadow. Wherever we see it moving towards shadow, then that's where that transition would go. So usually the transition color is that what we call the low light color, is the higher saturation color as it's moving out of light, and then it's that middle value, it's a slightly lowered saturation color as it moves into shadow. So as the shadow becomes deeper, the saturation will become less and less. Now, actually, if you want to sign up for one of my color courses, we have the color course, Cracking the Color Code. you would learn to do all this. And also, watch out for some of the workshops I do on color. I really go into this stuff in depth to help you to understand that. Okay, back to this. Stop the hawking. Now, as this moves into deeper shadow, like the brush, it goes closer into a darker value, and right here it is, a darker value and a less intense, or a cooler, darker value and cooler color. So less intense means cooler. You can see this is sort of happening right there. And then as it goes into if it goes into really, really deep shadow, it will go into something about like this. So you see, this is the direction. This is the direction that moves in. Now we can see happening within that, as we always do in flowering trees, and not only flowering trees but foliage. The whole area might not be in shadow. Some of these little pieces might be poking out and catching a little light. In that case, we go back into the light, and that's going to be warmer. So we might have a little bit of light poking out in here, and that becomes warmer. So I hope that you find that helpful to see how that principle works. It works in the direction of the sun, or whatever the direction of the sun is. You just gradate. But if you start out with a palette of colors already pre-mixed, where you have your shadow colors, which are cooler, and you have your not in shadow colors, which are warmer, and then you can, if you have them laid out in one of my value lines, then you can work within the same value areas and just move back and forth in the mixture, and then that would, I think, would give you exactly what you want. But as always, your key is observation. Don't ever try to do anything by rules, or else it's going to be stiff and maybe not quite so accurate. Learn it by observation. And once you learn it by observation, you could actually do it from memory. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell, so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section, and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianeMize.com, where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.